So I guess we can begin. Okay. Welcome, everyone. My name is Tom Ankner. I am the director of the Charles F. Cummings New Jersey Information Center at the Newark Public Library. Today's program focuses on Newark genealogy and genealogy research in a time of quarantine. I would like to begin by introducing our two guests, Melissa Johnson and Mark Szep. Melissa A. Johnson is a certified genealogist specializing in genealogical research, lecturing, writing, editing, and publishing. She has expertise in researching families with origins in New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, England, and Poland. Melissa has extensively researched the families of many of New Jersey's first settlers, including those from Newark and Elizabeth. She is an expert in New Jersey genealogy research and frequently teaches on New Jersey genealogy topics through the New Jersey Family History Institute. She is also proficient in using DNA test results to break through ancestral brick walls and assist adoptees and others with unknown parentage. Welcome, Melissa. Mark A. J. Szep is a longtime Essex County, New Jersey resident. He learned early on the joys of spending time with family and learning from an incredible generation of grandparents, great aunts, and uncles. A college history project in the 1990s was the catalyst for his love of genealogy and family history. Mark is a member of the Genealogical Society of New Jersey, the Association of Professional Genealogists, the National Genealogical Society, Czechoslovak Genealogical Society International, Polish Genealogical Society of America, and other local and national groups. Welcome, Mark. Melissa and Mark both have Newark ancestry and both have extensive experience researching Newark genealogy for themselves and others. Melissa and Mark, thank you for being with us today. And thank you for doing this for us. Okay, I want to begin by talking about some of the sources you feel are most useful when researching your Newark ancestry. Either one of you can go first, whichever one wants to go first. Mark?
Sure. So a lot of my own family and a lot of the research that I do is more sort of 20th century immigrants who come from, say, Poland and the other areas of the former Austro-Hungarian Empire. So that includes present day, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. Mm-hmm. So one of the sources that I've found to be most helpful for my own research, and specifically for that group too, especially if they were Catholic, is the records of the Archdiocese of Newark. And that can consist of both baptisms, marriages, death and burial records, cemetery records. It's a very robust and large collection that the Archdiocese has. And it's pretty accessible. You can access it both at the Monsignor William Noe Field Archives at Seton Hall University, but also the Family History Library in Salt Lake has also microfilmed those collections as well. So you have two different points of access, at least normally during a non-COVID-19 environment.
Yeah.
It's much more difficult to access those records now. But one of the reasons I found them so helpful, and one of the particular records, some of the marriage records, and from my own experience, specifically for some of my Polish relatives, some of the marriage records have been very helpful, the church marriage records, because in some of the Polish parishes, when they did a marriage record, they would actually state where the person was baptized as part of the record. So if you're looking for an additional way to kind of find a record that might point you in a specific location, either a territory or a specific town, some of those marriage records is a great place to look to see. And the difference being too, because in a civil record, it might just say Poland, but in this church record, because it has that extra information about a baptism, it might tell you a specific place in Poland. So it could be a good alternate source to the civil marriage record.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. Yeah. What about you, Melissa?
So I can focus a little bit on the earlier time period. So a lot of the time it's really hard to find, the next generation when you're working in a family where somebody's born in the early 1800s or maybe dies before or shortly after vital registration, which in New Jersey is 1848. So those time periods are a little more difficult for that kind of early 1800s, even late 1700s. Some of the cemetery records that I've found to be really helpful have been, from the early period of the bigger Newark cemeteries, and then some of the published cemetery records from the cemeteries that were around prior to that many of us don't think of because they no longer exist today. So that can be really helpful. Also, another thing that I think people overlook a lot are the Supreme Court records for New Jersey, which is a statewide resource, but I've had a lot of success with my Newark families looking at them. They're available at the State Archives, and there's a great database on the State Archives website as well. That includes an index to them, and for some records, a little bit of a detail of a transcription or names of parties involved in the court case. So those are really helpful. Also, specifically for Newark in the earlier time period, city directories started to come about in the 1830s, and it's been really helpful for me in a couple cases where a family is not together in 1850, but they were just a little bit before that. Either people died right around that time period, and the city directory at least can place them in the same household. So those are widely available at Newark Public Library, where Tom works, and also other places. But some of them are on Fold 3 as well. Sometimes we don't think of Fold 3 for city directories, but they have a good run of the Newark ones on there. So those are some of the resources that I think are sometimes overlooked, or we don't think to consult them, but they can help us with solving those Newark problems.
So can I just make a note about you mentioned, because Melissa mentioned the city directories. All of the Newark city directories, except for the final one, the 1964 one, are available on the Newark on the Newark Public Library's digital archive, which is the normal address is digital.npl.org, but they are available there. They're not all searchable. Sometimes you have to kind of browse through them, treat them like a book and look by page. But they are all there except for the final 1964 volume. They're all there on that site. Just wanted to let you know. I'm sorry, Mark.
The only thing I was going to add too, especially for that early time period that Melissa was talking about, I think we sometimes forget to look at land records, property records. Very often families would either be witnesses for each other, or they would transfer property to one another. So that can be another great resource to look for, especially in that early time period before, like Melissa said, before civil registration.
Okay, that's good. My colleague, Beth Zak-Cohen, just typed in the chat box the best link to get to the Newark Public Library's digital archive. So if you want to look at the city directories there, you can go to that link. Okay, thank you, Beth. Okay, so what repositories do you visit most often when researching Newark ancestors? Why don't we begin with you this time, Melissa?
So definitely the State Archives. Again, that's a great resource for statewide, everything, but a lot of the materials related to Newark are statewide materials. So, and even the Essex County records, there are a lot of them there. Unfortunately, there's not a great county archive in Essex County like there are in some places like Monmouth County or Morris County. But a lot of the records have been sent to the State Archives, so that's sort of a little bit of a substitute there. But definitely the State Archives. Also, another place that I think people forget, or it's not so convenient to get to, is Newark has a city archive that has a lot of material that is a little bit obscure. They have things that are fun, like traffic tickets and marriage license applications, even going into the more current period. They have and it's city records. So if you think of, there's statewide records, there's records kept on the county level like wills and deeds, and these are on the city level. So that's why they're at the Newark City Archives, which is the location. You have to make an appointment to go there. It's not a place that you just walk in like in Trenton at the State Archives, but it's a great facility. Again, it's a place that, I wouldn't go there, without knowing something specific that I was going to look at. So you don't go there to browse what's there. You look at what they have and, sort of figure out, oh, this is going to be really good to help me with this problem, or I want to look at this collection because it covers a time period I'm interested in, and I think that it would help me with this one case, or pulling together a story about this family. And I'll mention, it's not really a repository, but another great resource to find what's at the Newark City Archives is the Newark Archives Project. Their website is basically it's a collaboration of a couple groups that have set out to identify manuscript materials related to Newark that are at all kinds of facilities. So there are some that are in England, there's some that are in New Jersey and New York, all over the place. So manuscript materials related to Newark, but they have a great breakdown of what exactly the Newark City Archives has. It tells you in great detail what they have there.
Yeah. Okay. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, and just to quickly piggyback off of what Melissa was saying, I was going to say the city archives too. I've been there several times, but I think it's probably one of those kind of hidden gems. The one time I went there, they had a small collection of naturalization records. It was a very dusty box. My hands were filthy after I went through them. But it was an interesting source, and it was one of those things that you didn't know was there. And then just recently, using the Newark Archives project, which Melissa mentioned, I found out that they had an interesting collection, which will be on my list to go view, of burial permits, which are interesting. I've done some talks recently on death and burial records in New Jersey, and so this is an interesting collection I didn't know about before. And it looks like it's about 1906 to 1935, so a sort of interesting time period for those sort of burial and transit permits. In addition to that, I also do a lot of house histories. So one of the places that I tend to go is to the good old Hall of Records in Newark. I go to both the deed office there and then sometimes the probate office as well. And you can go through the old deed books, you know, and sort of trace back the property of a house or even a relative's or family's property if they bought property in Newark. So yeah, and then another one that I would say that every now and then I go to, and I think it's another hidden gem, is the New Jersey Historical Society, which is in Newark. They have a great website. You can do a search through their website to try and pull up keywords in any of their collections. I think they have a lot of hidden gems there. I've gone there to read everything from 18th century documents to Civil War letters to cemetery records. I think it's a robust collection that not many people know about, but it's always on my to-do list. Like if I'm looking for sort of like Melissa was saying, the more obscure things, just always check their website to see if anything pops up in any of their manuscript collections.
Okay. Mark, you mentioned property records. We have a question from one of the participants. Where are property records for Newark before 1900? Have you gone back that far with some?
Oh, absolutely. So everything is at the deed office. Mm-hmm. So they have books, I think, sort of going into the 18th century, but from what I remember, like the very first book, which is the oldest deeds for Essex County, no longer exists. I think, Melissa, if you can.
Yeah, I don't know the exact breakdown of the years, but there's also quite a bit that is pre-1900 at the state archives as well. So they have the grantee and grantor indexes. Right. I can't recall the exact end year of them, but they definitely have them pre-1900, the grantee and grantor indexes, and then a lot of the deeds. But anything that the state archives doesn't have, if they only have up to a certain time period, the rest you would find where Mark mentioned in the hall records.
And then part of that too, so the on the family history website on Family Search, they do have digitized versions of the older deeds as well. So it's sort of like a third place that you can go. But anything more recent, like so if you're starting with your own house, if you live in like Essex County and you want to start with the most recent deeds, they do have a portal now where you can look online for the earliest deeds, but then you have to go to the deed office to use their computers. But I think around like this 90s or so, it then switches to the books, and then you're there with the big deed books going through and using every deed to find the next deed. Yeah. But there is a good source of information if that's what you're searching, definitely.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about your experience doing research at the Newark Public Library? Mark, can you begin?
Sure. So I've done, I think the very first time I went to the Newark Library was actually for my own family research. But I've also been there for research for clients, going through city directories, going through old telephone books that were on microfilm, definitely using the computers to go through the microfilms for obituaries and death notices. But the funny enough, the first time that I went, I was researching a grand uncle of mine, so my grandmother's uncle. And she had always told us stories that when she was a kid, and of course she couldn't remember the year, when she was a kid, she had an uncle that was crossing a street in Newark, was hit by a car and killed. Yeah. But of course, that was all she knew. I could never get her to really tell me much more information. So of course, being the sort of detective genealogist that I am, I had to find out every detail of it. So I was able to search for him through census records, and I found his passenger manifest when he came to the U.S. From Poland. And I got to a point where I had found him up into the 1920s census. And then using city directories, I was able to sort of narrow that down closer, but I still had a window of time for when he might have passed away. So I went to the Newark Library, and Tom, you were actually the person who helped me at the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and I went through the indexes, the handwritten
Those
indexes.
little things, yeah.
Yes, the books
Great. Yeah.
for the Newark News. And his last name was Machunga. Even now, that's the pronunciation, but it's spelled Maciaga. So you can imagine all the different variations in spelling that you might get
Sure.
from both just that name and the pronunciation of that name. So I went through book for book, year for year, trying to find something on him. And then eventually I wound up getting a hit, and it wound up where they had it in the book as Nutchunga with an N.
Oh, wow.
So I got very lucky to come across
Yeah.
it. But based on that, using those indexes, I was able to find at least 3 or 4 newspaper articles. Exactly like my grandmother had said, he was crossing a street in Newark, had been hit by a car, had brain damage, died in the Newark City Hospital. And that led me to getting his death certificate. And from the death certificate, I was able to find his unmarked grave in a Holy Name Cemetery.
Oh,
Holy Cross Cemetery in North Arlington.
yeah. Good story. Good story.
Yeah.
Okay.
I won't bore you to tears with a similar story, but my dad grew up in Irvington, and he fell out of a second-story window when he was 2 years old, but no one really knew the exact date. So I had a similar scenario where I did almost the same thing as Mark, trying to find the exact date of the paper, because I knew it had made it into the paper. There were clippings of it my family had, but unfortunately they just clipped the picture of my dad, not the article, not the date, nothing useful to us. So I didn't have the date.
Yeah.
But I've definitely found a ton of interesting materials at the Newark Public Library. I would encourage everyone to look at their catalog. There's probably stuff there that would help you that you don't really know about. So look at the catalog and see. And I forget which Newark paper it is, Tom, that you have the original photos that the newspaper had. Was that the Evening News?
Yeah, that's the older photos are mostly from the Newark Evening News. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have, a newspaper article where there's a photo and it's kind of blurry, they have the originals that you might be able to get a better copy of. So that's a good benefit. Also, I mean, I've found, records related to cemeteries at the Newark Public Library as well. There were, one of the cemeteries I was really interested in is the former First Presbyterian Church Cemetery, which now was made, well, in the 50s, it was made into a parking lot, and now is just completely developed. But I did find some photographs that people took of the cemetery when it still existed. And people went through and found, that took photos, even though there are transcriptions and things like that. The transcriptions basically, they cover the date, the name, but not what the stone looked like, and maybe a little poem that was on it or something like that. So that was interesting to see. I also did a lot of research on the Newark riots in the Newark Public Library. So there was a lot of great material there, reports, there were police reports, there were photos, lots of different things. So I would definitely, you can go on the Newark Public Library website and access their catalog and just search for things, like cemetery, or search, you can make your search specific to the Newark Public Library's main branch, and it also actually searches as well, like the Irvington Public Library, and I believe the Historical Society too are all in the same catalog. So definitely check that out and see what unique materials might be of interest to you that you don't know that the library has.
Yeah, I'd say when in doubt, always search the catalog.
Okay. And somebody did ask a question if they have to be a member of the library to come in or to view our catalog. And no, you can just go to our website, npl.org, and you can, and anyone can come in. You don't have to have a library card to research at the library. Of course, right now we're closed like everyone else, but when we reopen, that's exactly, anyone can come in. You don't have to have a library card. Okay, so moving on to other things. What are some special strategies for researching genealogy in New Jersey and Newark? Why don't we begin with you, Melissa?
Sure. I mean, definitely don't limit yourself to trying to find that piece of paper that has the answer to your question on it. So a lot of the times you have to go about it in a more roundabout way, using what genealogists refer to as indirect evidence or circumstantial evidence. You're not going to find a piece of paper that says your ancestor's father, but you might find couple different clues in different sources, and you can piece together who their father is. So definitely don't don't focus on finding that key piece of paper, and research the collaterals and the friends and the relatives and the neighbors too. So a lot of my harder Newark problems have been solved with, you know, going in that sort of roundabout way. And also using DNA as well. So this wouldn't be a genealogy talk without DNA coming up in some way, shape, or form. But you know, DNA really has the ability to aid us now in those kind of, you know, special research problems or the more difficult ones. They can point us to a family, and we can look at the documentary sources for that family rather than trying to lead us to that family with our documentary sources. So definitely, you know, keep in mind, you know, for New Jersey, for Newark, that, you know, there are missing records during certain time periods. There are, you know, areas that are harder to research, geographic time periods and things like that. So keep in mind, you're not always going to find the birth, the marriage, the death that has the answer, or a deed that has the answer, but you need to research that family more broadly and find out, you know, who they interacted with, research them, and those are probably relatives of some kind, or will lead to relatives of some kind.
What about you, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would sort of echo what Melissa said. One thing I would say is definitely what Elizabeth Schoen Mills calls your fan club, the friends, associates, and neighbors, and looking at all the different records in those collateral areas, both collateral to your own family, but the friends, associates, and neighbors. Because if you're not finding, you know, if you can't find a marriage record for your own relative, but you might have a cousin that you find a marriage record for, and especially like I was saying about the Archdiocese of Newark records, you might actually see on their marriage record a location where they were baptized that might be very close to where your relative was baptized. So definitely look at those friends, associates, neighbors, to try and get more clues so that you're building all of the evidence to help you either, you know, to answer your sort of research question. One of the things I would also say is, and this sort of applies to all genealogy research, know the landscape, know the geography, know the area. Think about where were your relatives in Newark, where were they living? What was the ethnic makeup? Where was the nearest church? Where was the nearest cemetery? Know the lay of the land. So if you have Irish relatives that were living in an Italian neighborhood, you may not find them in the Italian church that's close by. They might have gone further away to the Irish church. So keep all those kinds of things in mind. Know the lay of the land, because that'll help you to try and broaden your search when you're running into dead ends. Okay.
Oh, good. So of course we have to talk a little bit about COVID-19 today. How has COVID-19, and this is going to seem like an obvious question, how has COVID-19 affected your ability to do genealogical research? Let's start with you, Mark.
I think in a lot of ways, it's curtailing what we're able to do, of course. New Jersey, a lot of the records that you want for genealogy research in New Jersey are not accessible online. So it's not like Pennsylvania where you can go and get death certificates on Ancestry.com. So we rely heavily on going to repositories and archives like the New Jersey State Archives for the BMDs, births, marriages, and deaths. So I think it makes it difficult in that sense to get your hands on the actual hard copies. So that can make it tough. The other thing too is some of what we do as researchers as well, we do a lot of work where we just obtain records, either for clients that just need a list of, these are all the death records I need, or if it's for a whole different area like air research where they need probate records. All those offices are closed as well. So any of that kind of record search work that we would do, it's tough to do right now. But I think there are still a lot of great things that we can do. New Jersey right now, say compared to 10 years, we have so many more indexes that are helpful. So this is a great time to search through all those different indexes and sort of create your list of, these are all the things I'm going to do the very second that the archive opens up and I can get in there because we don't know what it'll look like even when things start to open. Yeah. So I think now is the time to utilize all those indexes, you know, from Reclaim the Records, the ones that are on Ancestry now, the searchable databases on the New Jersey State Archives website. Build your sort of list of to-do items so that when we start opening up, you know, it makes that process much easier.
Okay. Anything to add, Melissa?
Yeah, I agree with, everything Mark said. That's kind of my approach as I've been going through and looking at indexes and basically making a big to-do list. And I'll probably be in the archives for a week straight
Right.
when they open.
Yeah.
But another thing you can do is don't forget that, the Family History Library, and the Family History Centers, even though they also are closed, a little trick that a lot of genealogists have been doing, that if you have a laptop and you've been in there and been on their Wi-Fi, you can go to the facility in the parking lot and sit in your car and not expose yourself to any germs and log on and basically use the resources there. So most of them still have their their Wi-Fi on. So a lot of people have been doing that. So you just find a place in the parking lot where you are closest to the little room where the research is. So I've actually been doing that for years, and now all these other people are doing it because of COVID. So I'm a night owl. So I've been doing that for a long time, like going at 10 o'clock at night to the parking lots and getting all my research done. But a lot of people have been doing that. So don't forget, the things that are available behind the paywall or behind the the locked wall for family search. You can still access some of those. And then another thing too, for those of you, not to focus too much on DNA, but it's a good time to kind of go through and look at your DNA matches and come up with research plans based on who your DNA matches are. So especially for those kind of brick wall, Newark or New Jersey families, see if you can sort of zero in on a family that you think might be your next connection, the next generation based on your DNA matches. Focus on the DNA a little bit and come up with, do some legwork and indexes and things like that so that when archives open up, you can have a plan for what you're going to do going forward.
Okay. So you are both small business owners. You both you both work for yourself, really. Can you talk a little bit about, this is more of a personal question, I guess. Can you talk a little bit about COVID-19 and the effect it has had on small businesses like yours? I mean, I think it's making it harder to earn money, for one thing, probably, right? Can you talk a little bit about that? I don't want you to.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. So, I mean, it's a lot of our work obviously involves going to repositories like we just mentioned. So a lot of projects are sort of on hold. So I think there's still a lot that's unknown about how long this is going to last and how long some form of social distancing will be happening. But, I anticipate that some of those projects will get kind of closed out and then maybe restarted later on. Some clients who don't mind and, having them on hold might just have them on hold indefinitely. There's still a lot that I can do with my DNA cases. I can still, send away for records in other countries and, they'll just get processed when they get processed. But for right now, I'm trying to, sort of get all of my client work to the point where, I'm just waiting to get into a repository and everything else is done as far as the research plan, so that if I do have to hand it off, at least I can give the client the research plan, and that's, sort of where we stopped. And then, like I said, working on DNA cases or other cases that don't necessarily involve, going to a repository.
Okay. Anything to add, Mark?
Yeah, I agree with what Melissa was saying. I think part of it too is anytime you have that sort of like client researcher relationship, I think it's all about the open communication between the two people and knowing that, being upfront with like, this is what we can do right now, this is what we can't do right now. Where would you like me best to put my efforts on your behalf? I think genealogy as the industry itself, because a lot of the research that we do, and a lot of the clients that we have, genealogy is not sort of like an essential need, right? So I think as an industry, it tends to be a good indicator of when times are good and when times are tough, because it's people are using their disposable income when they're working on genealogy. So I think as we go forward and there's sort of that economic uncertainty after the post-COVID period, I think that'll be interesting to see how it affects the sort of genealogy as an industry itself and other professional genealogists. But I mean, the great thing is we all have that love for genealogy, and that's not going to go away. And I think a lot of people are putting time into their trees and time into research right now. And so they're going to be identifying more areas of their own family research where they'll need help. I think there's more people probably doing genealogy right now than there ever has been, late night hours, because they have the time to do it.
Yeah.
So there could be a lot of people that are looking for help after this. So I think it'll be interesting. You know, every industry has that, right? Like every industry is going to sort of try and figure out where it's standing after this. And I think genealogy is no different.
Yeah. Pent up demand. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so let's open it up to everyone. I'll unmute everyone. And if anybody has any questions, I know, can somebody raise your hand? And I think I unmuted. A few people are still unmuted, but does anybody have any questions, any comments they'd like to make?
There's a couple questions in the chat, Tom.
Yeah, no, I saw those. I just wanted to see whether somebody else had anything to say. I know, Linda, you had asked some questions. Linda? No, I guess she's not on mute. All right, so Linda had asked, what resources, techniques, and strategies are useful for descendants of those moving from the South to the city of Newark through the Great Migration? Have any of you done that type of research? Either of you done that kind of research?
So, I mean, a lot of the same things that we've talked about before are going to still be, you know, essential for that. So depending on, you know, the time period and the geography, you know, you're going to want to look at vital records or their substitutes like church records. And then, you know, the same wills and deeds and all of those records. Newspapers are also great. You know, making sure that it's exhausting all those resources that we talked about. I think, you know, it's not really very different, you know, that kind of research. But, you know, just making sure you're exhausting all of that.
And I think too that one of the things I would say is I think, and Tom can speak to this too, but I think the Newark Public Library is a great resource, especially if you're looking for more of the sort of cultural aspect of it. There were a lot of organizations that were started and a lot of churches specifically for people of color that were started in Newark. And I think the Newark Library has a very a good, robust collection of materials to sort of cover that cultural aspect.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Susan, you have a question.
Yes. How can I find out, besides the Newark Evening News, what newspapers around 1906 would be servicing Irvington and Newark? I have an article from 1906. My great-grandmother's brother was killed when he was 16 in an explosion. And I have the article, but I don't know what paper or the exact date.
Oh, okay. Well, the Newark Evening News was being published then. There was also a paper called the Newark Daily Advertiser.
Okay.
They've been an Irvington Weekly. Melissa knows more about the Irvington Weekly.
Yeah, there's the Irvington Herald. I'm not sure if it goes back to 1906. It might not go back that far, but I would check any of the Newark papers for Irvington for that time period.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And to get a sense too, you can always go on the Newark Public Library's website and go through their list of all their microfilm holdings and newspaper holdings, because sometimes that'll give you an idea of what the collections they have, and they'll tell you what areas that it sort of correlates to as well.
Great.
Again,
Thank you.
my colleague has also included a link to the Chronicling America site as well, which will newspapers across the country, and you can limit it to New Jersey, et cetera. But yeah, as Mark said, on our website, we have a list of the newspapers we have on microfilm, so you can
Okay.
also.
Great.
Any other questions? Yes, Marilyn.
Two things. Rita had asked about records for Newark police and firemen. And also, will that chat stay up that we can pull up those links, or do we need to do them while we're on the Zoom? That Beth's been putting up.
It's recorded. It's with the recording, so I can post it with the recording when I post it on our Facebook and YouTube.
Okay, great, thanks.
Also, for the person who was looking for information on police and firemen, the Newark Archives Project website that I mentioned, they have categories that you can check off of things you're interested in, like church records or religion, and police and fire are both included in there. So if you're looking for specific collections relevant to police and fire, I know there are quite a few photo collections and other records. They're also, I don't know how active it is now, but Newark Fire Department did have a little archive many years ago. I don't know if anyone has any experience with that, and I don't know if it's still around, but you might want to check that out as well.
Thanks.
There's also a Newark Police Museum as well, where you can get, if you're an ancestor who was a police officer in Newark, you can get some information about his or her record when they were a police officer. I've done that on 2 ancestors of mine who were Newark police officers, the Newark Police Museum. I would Google them to find out.
I did see something on that a while ago because my 3 times great-grandfather's son was a policeman, and actually he was the 2nd policeman hired in the Central Market or something. And I found an extensive obituary on him that he was injured in 1906 apprehending somebody, and it debilitated him enough that he had to retire. And I was trying to find the newspaper article and haven't been able to find anything. So I thought maybe I could find something. And also my great uncle was 2 right off the bat that I know. So.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks.
Good to know.
Yeah, I would definitely suggest that for anyone, just check out the Newark Archives Project website.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've never heard of that, so I'll have to check that. Yeah.
yeah, it's fascinating, especially if you have a topic that's not straightforward and you're looking for any kind of that sort of like cultural background or other types of ancillary information to add to just, the standard birth, marriage, death. That could be a great place to find the more obscure material. I think there is amazing material sitting in archives right now that we just don't know about because we don't have the access and it's not top of mind for us. So I think the Newark Archives Project is one of those ways to bring all of us researchers to those really important materials. And then once everything opens up, we can start to actually go there and give them, visit them and research there and support them basically, yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
What about researching any Ukrainian family members for marriages and births?
As with many of the Eastern Europeans, if they were Catholic or Orthodox or anything, I would, if you're not finding a marriage record on the state level, I would definitely look to local churches, figure out where each party was living, where they were likely to get married. A lot of the time, especially with immigrants who are getting married in churches, the record wasn't filed with the state. So just the fact that you're not finding it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means that maybe it was in a church and that it wasn't filed on a civil level. And then also, checking out of state as well. So I've had a lot of Eastern European relatives in New Jersey of, different Eastern European ethnicities that got married in Pennsylvania because they had relatives out there, and even on Long Island as well. So definitely think outside the box of where they might have gotten married. Hopefully it's nice and easy and it's the local church of whatever religion they were, but if you're not finding it there, think about, where their relatives were. If they were, only a few in the US, where was their uncle living? Was he in, Nanticoke, Pennsylvania? And maybe she got married out there because that's where the whole family was.
Okay. Thank you.
And I would think too is when you say local church, remember it may not be the church that's in town. If you know that, say they were Greek Catholic, look for where the closest Greek Catholic church was, which could have been 2 towns away. A lot of times the original records are still with the parish unless the parish is closed, and they might be moved to the local archive or the local diocese, the head of the diocese or so. So keep that in mind too, because many churches have closed too. And so it's all about where the record goes after the church closes.
Great, thank you.
And generally speaking, Mark, with the Catholic records, when the church closes, they go to the Catholic archives usually, right? At Seton Hall?
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
Anybody else? Any other questions from anyone? Any other comments people would like? Ray, yes.
Hi, Mark. How you doing? This one applies to you. As I had typed in there, was Vailsburg a formal part of Newark at the turn of the last century? I don't know the geography that well. And did it have its own city directory?
Vailsburg, I think, became part of Newark around 1905. And I'm not sure they were included in the Newark directories or not. I'd have to look that up. I'm not sure.
Okay. Does anybody have any other hints on Vailsburg or any
I think
thoughts?
in like the late 1800s, I believe they were part of like the Orange Directory, like Vailsburg and maybe
okay.
some other areas. I think they were in the Orange Directories, not Newark.
And where can you access the Orange directories? Are they also in an index at Newark Public Library?
We have many at the Newark Public Library, the directories of the oranges. I don't know when they start. I'd have to, again, that would be on the list. We have a list of city directories on our website, and it should be on the list when the orange directories begin. I want to say the 1870s, that might be a little early.
The orange directories are also on Ancestry for some years, because I have a lot of family from Vailsburg and Newark, and I've found them. And the oranges are sometimes included with other ones, because there's like Hillside, Maplewood, a lot of those are included in, like there's 5 different towns included, so you have to sort of search, but you can find them.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say? Any questions?
I'd just like to say thanks for doing this. This is great.
Yeah.
I'm glad you liked it. Good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we're
I know,
My
it's
whole-
nice to
my
talk
whole
about genealogy.
One side of
for
my
a bit.
family. My whole family is from Newark, and trying to find stuff sometimes is difficult. So it's nice to get other people's ideas and things they've found to start looking.
Okay, good.
Actually, can I throw out another question? Where are the best records for the very, founding families of Newark records, the 1666 stuff?
So those families are very, very difficult to research. I'll give you a couple of good resources. There are the early town records of Newark that are published. The book is, I don't know if it's fully available on Google Books. It might only be partially available on Google Books, but it's well published and in a couple of libraries. The originals for those are at the New Jersey Historical Society. So that gives a lot of the kind of who was involved in the establishment and early history of Newark. There's a lot of little mini land transactions in there. There's lots of, in general, just kind of the function of the town moving forward. So if you have someone who was here very early, who was one of the founders, you can probably find some information about them in there. Unfortunately, Newark doesn't have, most of those founders of Newark were part of, what later was First Presbyterian Church and was part of the early congregation in Newark, and there aren't any records related to that really. The earliest church records in Newark for that First Presbyterian Church are in like the late 1700s. A lot of them were lost, so we don't have the benefit of having those early church records. But you're going to be looking at early land transactions, early court records to kind of define relationships between people. Wills are definitely big. Not everyone had a will, but definitely look towards those. In lieu of church records, which we don't have, you're going to look at wills and land transactions and the early court records. A lot of the Supreme Court records are helpful with that. And there's a lot of published family histories out there on the early Newark families. I will say they're mostly undocumented, and I found a lot of them to be very inaccurate. So you probably can, trace your family history back to a Newark founder, but it's probably not correct, and I would suggest doing it yourself. The families that I descend from, I found that the way that the books tell it is not the full story. They're either missing a generation or they got someone wrong, because there were 6 John Johnsons living in Newark in 1700. So it's difficult to trace, but those are kind of the key resources, and they are very limited, unfortunately.
And would you say most things are digitized, or is there still a lot of things that are undigitized sitting in storerooms somewhere?
So most of the early land records and the early court records are not digitized, but you can find indexes to them online. I would say the majority is not digitized. So that's going to be research in repositories for that earlier time period.
Thank you.
We have another question. Yes, Beth.
Oh, I was just going to ask, since we haven't talked about it, about Jewish records, specifically synagogue records and stuff like that. Have you had any luck finding that type of stuff?
I haven't done, personally, I haven't done a lot of research on Jewish families in Newark.
I can't really say that I have either, unfortunately. Most of my research has been on Catholic or various Protestant families. So unfortunately, I don't have a ton of information on that.
Beth?
So, Mary, you had something to say?
Yeah, just, this is just in the beginning stages. It won't be for a long time, but we just acquired, my group just acquired all the Jewish cemetery records from the Newark area. But right now, because of our other project that's ongoing, it's still on the back burner until we can finish all the projects that we're involved in right now. But we will be putting together a database of the Jewish burials in the Newark cemetery area.
Oh, that'd be
That's
great.
I think a lot of them are also on jewishgen.org if anyone's looking. So that's
Yes,
really good.
They are on Jewish Gen, but they have not completed it. And that's what
exactly.
and my group will probably be completing it at some point.
Okay.
That's great. Yeah.
Great.
Hi, Tom. Hi.
Hi, Dale.
Hi, Dale Colson. I'm a librarian. I'm a colleague of Beth and Tom. And the gentleman had a question earlier about city directories. There is a beta version of city directories on ancestry.com. And you would search in the card catalog U.S. city directories. And then you would put in the name and place name, and you may find the family that you're looking for. If you happen to have a Newark Public Library card, Ancestry.com is free during the pandemic, so help yourself to that. Thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, we are making Ancestry available for free at home to people with Newark Public Library cards. So during that's something that Ancestry is allowing during the closure, during our COVID-19 closure. Yeah, other libraries are doing that, to New York Public too as well. Susan, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, Melissa, where did you get that family tree hanging on the wall behind you?
Oh, I made it. So I actually
made it?
I made them as part of my business.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
By the way, thank you for that tip about the city directories. But I just want to know, are you really down in the tropics, or is that a background? We should be with you. We should be with you.
Of East Orange.
Okay, I do have a question.
Not the tropics.
Okay, I do have a question. A couple of years ago, many of the people on the screen here, I remember we were at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center for the one on German neighborhoods. And there was a gentleman down the road, the priest. I don't know if he was from St. Mary's, but he was writing a history on St. Mary's Church. And I sent him photos of what I had, and I sent him a query, and I never heard. Is he okay? Is he still doing it, or anybody know?
Mary, do you know?
Yeah, that was Father Curley you talked to, Ray.
Yes, that's correct.
And I now have all the St. Mary's records. So if you can talk to me afterward if you want to. We've already completed the first phase of the database for St. Mary's Cemetery, which has not been available to the public. The Archdiocese has let our group go in, and we have digitized all the records, and we've actually created a database, but the records were in such poor shape that it's going to take us a while to get it in a functioning thing. But I still can do, a search, alphabetical search for you, and also hopefully tell you who's buried with people in the plots. But it's not perfect right now. We also photographed the entire cemetery, so we're putting the photographs against the database and making corrections that way. But it's going to take a little while, again, with all our projects going on. And I see Ray there, and I'm wondering why he's not typing my things right now.
That's because I'm here.
I see you too, Kelly, and you're not typing either. I don't understand that. So obviously I have a lot of volunteers out there who are typing all kinds of lists for us. But if anybody does need help with those few things ahead of time, we're in the middle of creating a database, an extensive database for Mount Pleasant Cemetery. So
Okay,
Some of our projects that we have ongoing.
thank you, Mary. If I may, as a follow-up to that, so that's great that you're coordinating that. But what Father Curley said is for St. Mary's, he said there's other documents about when the construction and who did things. And he had records of people who etched their names into the tower and that sort of thing. But he seemed to have records even beyond the birth, death, marriage records, etc. Are you familiar with that at all?
A little bit. Father Curley is, he's a wonderful gentleman, and he's a little bit like the Peanuts character Pigpen, with
Okay.
his office is not organized. He gave us everything he had, he says, with to do with St. Mary's Cemetery, but not the church.
The church, I'm referring to the church.
The old church you're talking about.
Yes,
The old church that was rolled down the street to the new location.
correct.
Yeah. I have found a lot of that material already written up online. So I'm not sure if how much he has. He said he is writing. He also had a triple bypass.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thing.
didn't know that.
Yeah. So he
that was
was.
a couple of years ago. Yeah. Hey, Ray, he's still at St. Benedict's Prep. He's the librarian at St. Benedict's Prep. You could probably contact him there.
Okay, thank you.
Good luck.
He's a little inundated with requests, so you don't always get a quick response from him.
Okay. Would anybody like to add anything else? Anybody have any other questions or comments?
This was great.
Was great,
Oh,
yeah.
Good.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad you enjoyed it. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Mark. And
Thank
thank you,
you.
everyone else, for showing up today to take part in this. This was a really enjoyable little talk.
When's the next one?
We have, Beth, help me out here. When is the next genealogy? Don't we have something next week on African American genealogy? Something or
We
Dan?
have a DNA, a film discussion with Reggie.
Uh-huh.
I can tell you, I think it's on Wednesday at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, on the 29th. I think it's going to present it on Vimeo with a discussion following, and it's about a young man and his experience with his African-American genealogy. He showed it at a few film festivals, and it was well received.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm also trying to put together a session on the census records in genealogy. Why we're trying to encourage people to fill out their census forms, and we're talking to a genealogist about putting together a session on how genealogists use census records and why they're important to genealogists. And so that will probably be coming up sometime in May, most likely.
And then you also have the 1918 flu program next week,
Yes.
this time,
Yeah.
which
Oh,
might be
that'll be
interesting if
good.
people have,
Yeah, next
relatives.
Thursday, at this time, 1 o'clock, next Thursday, we have a session with two historians talking about, comparing the 1918 flu to the current pandemic.
Did you see on the History Channel about 3 or 4 weeks ago, they had the 1918 Spanish flu, a great documentary on the History Channel on that.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I did not get to see the end of it, but I'd like to go back and look at it and see how they resolved, the whole situation. Because it just kind of tied right into what we're going through.
Yeah.
So that would be really interesting.
Yeah, the big question I have about the 1918 flu is my sense when I read about the history of that is that healthy people were not asked to stay at home and
Right.
the way they are today, which may have contributed to how much it spread. But I mean, it was interesting to me. That's one of the questions I'm planning to bring up next week when I talk to the two historians.
How did they arrest it? That was the part I didn't get to see the end of.
Oh yeah, I don't know. That's I'm not an expert on that. That's something maybe you can tune in next week.
Yes. Is that going to be again? I need to get all these down so I can make sure I put them on my stickies.
They're all on our website, npl.org.
Okay.
Our calendar, yeah, if you want to.
We have a calendar on our website.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so thank you, everyone, and particularly Mark and Melissa, thank you very much. And this was terrific. Thank
This
you.
was great.
Be safe,
Thank you.
everyone.
Take care, everyone.
You
Stay safe.
too.
Have a good day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye all.
Bye.